Hi everybody, welcome to a special segment of A Course in Miracles Applied. This segment has two topics that are kind of combined together. One is a lesson, which is lesson 152 in the workbook, called The Power of Decision is My Own. The other is a poem by Dylan Thomas. Dylan Thomas was a poet. He lived between 1914 and 1953. He died very young. And his famous poem is "Do Not Go Gently Into That Good Night." And we're going to combine this Dylan Thomas poem with lesson 152 in this special edition of A Course in Miracles Applied. Okay, so I'm going to read the poem first, and then we'll take it from there. It's just six stanzas. It's pretty short. I will not do the poem justice with my expression of it. I'm just going to read it. I'm not going to even try to capture what's in this poem. Okay, do not go gently into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Thou wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my Father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. It's a very powerful poem. And I just recently saw it. I think, let me see. Michael Sheen, he is an actor, I think a British or Scottish, a Welsh. He's a Welsh actor. There's a bit on YouTube where he performs that poem, and Michael Sheen, and it's really incredible. And that was the inspiration for this segment. So there are a couple of things that go into this. And it has to do, I believe, with the Course's teaching of the decision-making process. I just have to see if I can get this right. So there's a lot in the Course about that we can make a choice, right? We have to make a choice. The lesson 152 is the one that spells it out very clearly. The power of decision is my own, right? So Jesus tells us that we have the decision. It is our decision to decide between the ego and the Holy Spirit. And that's just a thread that goes through the whole Course. It's basically on every page. The whole curriculum is laid out for us to get to that point of this final decision. The final and last decision that we make will be the one for the Holy Spirit and against the ego. And then the rest, the ego will fall away, and we will be back home in that the oneness of heaven that we have never left. So Jesus says the power of decision is yours. You, as the Son of God, as the decision maker, the mind is the mechanism of decision. He says, you are the one that is making that choice. Nobody else can make this choice for you. You are the one that is making the choice between the ego and the Holy Spirit. You are making the choice between the strength of Christ and the weakness of the ego. And you're making that choice every second of the day. So that is the baseline of the whole course, to lead us to that realization and then practice it and then make this final choice against the ego thought system. But as we all know, from our practice with this course, from our day-to-day living with this course, except for the first, the beginning stages where decision seems to be relatively easy, the further we go with this course, the more we realize that decision for the Holy Spirit is the hardest thing ever. If it would be easy, we wouldn't need the course, we would be at peace, we would not be in this world. So everybody that is in this world is here because we have made a decision against God. Now that we're here in this world, trying to play this game of guilt and death and sin, that's why we're here. So we have made that decision against God, otherwise we wouldn't be here hiding from God and trying to get away from this guilt. So that was our decision, right? And we have also abdicated our role as the decision-making mind. We have then given this decision-making power to something on the outside. We have given the decision-making power to the neighbor upstairs that is running around at 2 o'clock in the morning. We make them responsible for how we feel. We make everybody and everything in this world responsible for how we feel, which means we have given the power of decision to the other person or to something in the world. We have given it away, and we have not passively given it away. We have actively given away our power to decide, and then we forgot that we have given away that power. And Jesus reminds us over and over and over and over again in the course that the power of decision, in like lesson 152, the power of decision is my own. And then in this first paragraph, he lays it out very clearly. In this first paragraph in lesson 152, he says, no one can suffer loss unless it be his own decision. No one suffers pain except his choice elects this state for him. No one can grieve, nor fear, nor think him sick unless these are the outcomes that he wants. And no one dies without his own consent. Nothing occurs but represents your wish, and nothing is omitted that you choose. Here is your world, complete in all details. Here is its whole reality for you, and it is only here salvation is. It's a very clear paragraph. It's you can't get around it, right? How clear it is. He says the power of decision is your own. In the second paragraph, he says, you may believe that this position is extreme and too inclusive to be true. And then he says, yet can truth have exceptions? Right? Can truth have exceptions? Can it be that some of the things do not occur because of your decision? There's a lot of guilt associated with us taking back that power to decide. That's why it takes so long. right? Because we have used the power that we have inherently, because we are the Son of God, we have used this power to seemingly separate from God. So for us, and we have explained that a couple of times before, for us, we associate power with sin. Right? That's why we want to give that power of decision away and say, no. I couldn't have killed God. Look, I have no power at all. The world has all the power over me. I'm a poor victim of all kinds of circumstances. I could never have killed God. I don't have the guilt. Somebody else has that guilt. Whoever has the decision-making power, be that politicians or the weather or the neighbor upstairs or our partner, the economy, whatever it is, our body, right? But our goal is not to have power. That's why we say to Jesus, I don't have any power. See, I couldn't have killed God because I'm powerless. The only power of decision I have is whether I go to the gas station here or across the street, or which groceries I buy, or which clothes I buy, or maybe which job I take. That might not even be my decision. It just seems to happen to me. Everything seems to happen to me, and I have nothing to do with that. And eventually I realized even coming into this world was not up to me, right? It was my parents. I just got pushed out, and here I am, and I have nothing to do with that, right? I'm the victim of the world. And we do that because we're so afraid to connect power, to bring the power and the sin back together and have Jesus look at it with us and say, is it true that my power can be sinful? And eventually we will recognize that our power must only be benign. We cannot have destructive power. Nothing real can be threatened, right? The oneness of heaven cannot be changed or threatened in any way by our power. We do not have the power to change the oneness of heaven. So we disassociate sin with power, and eventually we can take back that power. And we will take back that power for one single purpose only, which is to decide against the ego and for the Holy Spirit. Right? That's when we ultimately take back that power, but it can't happen overnight. It needs a lot of preparation, because we still associate, as I said, we still associate sin with power. That power is loaded with guilt. That power of deciding for Jesus is so loaded with guilt, we don't want to use that power. That's why we're not at peace. Right? Jesus says, I want the peace of God. To say these words is nothing. To mean these words is everything. We say these words, I want the peace of God, but we actually don't want it, because we don't want to use that power we have to decide for God, because we think the moment God recognizes that we have power to decide for him, he will kill us. Because we think we're so sinful, because we think we actually were able to separate from something that cannot be separated from. Oneness cannot be divided. Right? But we believe we did it. We were successful in separating from God. So we used our power in such a wrong way that we swore to the ego never to touch that power again. Say, I'm not going to use that power at all, especially not to decide for God. Because God, the moment I use that power, God knows, oh, like the eye of Sauron, right? It goes right over there. This one is using the power to decide. He will be or she will be annihilated. That is our fear. That's why it takes a long time to arrive at that conclusion that we are not only encouraged to use this power, but that power is absolutely benign. It cannot be used for evil. It can only be used for good. And that good is to choose the Holy Spirit. The evil would be to choose the ego, which is nothing. The choice for the ego has no consequences, because we cannot separate from the oneness of heaven. It's simply not possible. So, it takes a long time for us to acknowledge or to accept that that power is ours. So, in practical terms, at some point in our journey, whenever that is for us, and it'll probably be, well, it's most likely a period of time where we grow into that. And the Course says Christ comes into his own, right? I think that's what he means with that. We grow into that when we lose this fear of using that power, and we're using it more and more to decide for Jesus more and more, because that's the one decision left that we have is the choice between Jesus and the ego, between the Holy Spirit and the ego, right? And we will slowly grow into that, come into our own as the full decision maker, no longer rejecting that function as decision maker, right? We have rejected that function as decision maker for a very long time. We have said, no, I'm not the decision maker. Everything around me is the decision maker. I'm just the decision receiver. I receive the effects of a decision that was made somewhere not in me, because I'm so afraid of that power. So we come into our own over time to lose enough guilt to get used to the idea that we can use that power for good, to ultimately return home. But this is a long process because of our fear, right? So even though Jesus says on every page, the power of decision is your own, he knows we're not just gonna go like that and say, yeah, sure, I'm gonna decide for you. No. If we were able to do that, we would do it. We would, right now, you wouldn't be listening to this tape. I wouldn't talk into the phone. We would both be at peace, in the peace of God, right? You need do nothing, that's it. Right, but we're still not in the peace of God. That means we still think that power that we have to make that decision is associated with our belief in sin. So that's the process, is to loosen that power from the sin, that dissociate those two and realize my power is fully benign. All the lessons in the workbook really, really say my power is benign. It is not a threat to the love of God. Even though I choose wrongly 1,000 times a day, we cannot use our power to actually separate from God. It's simply not possible. Right? There's some screw heads that have a square. You know, you have Phillips and you have the regular screwdriver, and some of them have squares. And you're like, who has a tool like that? Right? Nobody has a tool that is square, that you can open a screw. Right? So we just have a Phillips screwdriver. We can't do it. And it's a very bad example. But we're unable to open that screw or close the screw, whatever it is, because that tool we just simply don't have. The tool of the ability to separate successfully from the love of God is simply not available to us. And we're happy at the end. We will be happy that this is so, that nothing real can be threatened. Right? My love for God, God's love for me, for us, cannot be threatened at all. But to get to that point, we have to recognize, and Jesus does it very slowly, very slowly. That's why he says, you may believe that this position is extreme and too inclusive to be true, that you have all the power over everything that's happening in your life. We're like, oh my God, no way. That's why we read over this, we glance over it, we go to the next lesson. We can't let it sink in because that power we fully associate with sin. And we want to separate, we're like, I'm powerless, I can't do it. And slowly but surely, Jesus says, let's bring the two together, power and sin, and realize there is no sin in power. You have not misused your power and successfully separated from God. It is simply not possible. Okay, so what the hell does this all have to do with this poem? Okay, so basically what this has to do with this poem is, and this is my opinion, it might not be true. You have to find out for yourself if this is true for you. At some point, we will have to make an active choice against the ego. We will have to say, you know what, I've had it. I don't want to go through this again. I don't want to think this again about somebody else. I don't want this hate anymore. I don't want this fear anymore. I don't want this guilt anymore. I'm actively deciding against the ego. And it's an active process. It is not a passive thing that's just going to happen. Eventually, we will have to say no to the ego. You can go, you shall not pass, right? And it can be a quiet no, but it must be at that point a no that has all the power of the Son of God behind him. That will tell the ego in no uncertain terms, I'm done. Right? So in this poem, the dying of the light is the ego. Right? In the ego, the light is dying. That's why the ego is completely no light. It's a vacuum. It's a black hole swallowing all the light. The dying of the light, the ego's basic premise is you have only darkness in you, no light. So the dying of the light is the ego, right? And the poem says, do not go gentle into that good night. Do not just say yes to the ego. That is, we say yes to the ego all this time because we're afraid to use the power to say no way. I'm done. We're afraid to use that power, but eventually we will have lessened our belief in sin enough that we will now stand up and our eyes will no longer be cast down, as Jesus says, your eyes cast down and your promise to your friends, sin, guilt, and fear are friends, that you will never leave them. We will break that promise. And we will not do it in fear anymore because we realize we are the ones with the power. We're the sons of God. Right? We do not have to bow down to the ego. Like Aragorn says to Frodo, right? And Sam and the others says, you bow to no one. Right? We no longer have to bow to the ego in reverence. Like, oh, it saved us from God, from the wrath of God. We're like, this was a story. I don't believe it anymore because the sin is gone. Right? At some point, the guilt will be gone, and we will look at this story that the ego tells us and says, you know what? It's a good story, but I'm not buying it anymore. Right? I'm going to say no. So we're saying no, and this no will have to be an active no. It's not something that just happens. And if we come in contact with that fear of saying no to the ego, that's really, really helpful. Say, Jesus, please look at this with me, this fear of saying no to the ego. What if I would say no to fear? Like, no way, I'm not gonna be afraid anymore. I'm not gonna believe in this sinful self anymore. No. We must learn to say no to the ego. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage against the dying of the light. Basically says, say no to the ego. And say no with all the power of the Son of God behind him. And see how far you can go into that space. How much you can fill out that space within you that can say no to the ego. It's like, I've done this long enough. I'm done. I rage against the dying of the light. This is a right-minded rage, right? I'm going to say, no, this is it. No longer. I'm done. I'm not believing this story in sin, guilt, and fear anymore. I don't believe my brothers are the bad guys anymore. I don't believe I'm a victim of the world anymore. I don't believe the world is a victim of anything anymore. I'm the decision maker, I'm the Son of God, and I'm going to say no to the ego. Right? And those are just different examples of different, I would say, self-concepts that we have made. And out of that self-concept, we make that decision. Right? Old age. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. So wise men, they know at the end of their life, right? Good men or women, this is a male kind of poem, 1914 or 1950. But it's us as the decision maker, right? Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage against the dying of the light. Wherever we are in the process with the course, we can at some point practice that, saying no to the ego, and coming in contact maybe with that fear. Right? That fear of making that decision, that fear of saying no to the ego that we believe so far has protected us from the wrath of God. We think we will die if the ego dies, so we can't say no to the ego, right? That's the ultimate no to ourselves because we think we're the ego. And the less we believe in our own guilt, the more we come into our own, like the Course says, Christ comes into his own. Let me just see where that is. Yeah, in chapter 11, section 6. For until Christ comes into his own, the Son of God will see himself as fatherless. Right? We believe we're fatherless because we believe we're so sinful. We have successfully separated from the oneness of heaven. That's why we believe we're fatherless, and that is a sin. Right? We think we're never going to get that sonship back, that we are the Son of God. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Right? Do not give in to the ego that says, if you decide against me, you will certainly die. Right? Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage against the dying of the light. Right? We come into our power more and more, the more we can realize that the sin we believe in so heavily is a made-up story. It is not a true statement about us. Right? The rage against the dying of the light becomes our silent, quiet revolution that says no. And we might be a little surprised, about the strong no that we can muster, right? We might overdo it a little bit. That's totally fine. We're just practicing coming into this role of decision maker. Like, I have the decision. I know I can't make it. I'm too afraid still, but I'm going to try to say no to the ego and see what happens. If I'm feeling sad or anything, I can say no to that. And if I would be able to use the power of my mind, because I don't believe in sin, I could say no to any emotion or any experience within myself, and it would vanish. Like, I'm afraid, I'm frightened, I'm anxious, I'm scared. We could say no to that, and it would go like that. Because we have the power of decision. The power of decision is my own, as lesson 152 says. And the more we are afraid, we realize we're afraid of that, making that decision, is because we still think we're sinful. And eventually we will be able to say no to that thought of sin. And we practice in any way, shape, or form. We practice no, not today. And you, my Father, there on the sad side and the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Do not go gentle into that good night. Do not let the ego win. And says in paragraph 5 of lesson 152, the power of decision is my own. Paragraph 5, as God created you, you must remain unchangeable, with transitory states by definition false. And that includes all shifts in feeling, alterations in conditions of the body and the mind, in all awareness and in all response. This is the all-inclusiveness which sets the truth apart from falsehood, and the false kept separate from the truth as what it is. And we slowly but surely accept that statement that as God created us, we must remain unchangeable. Transitory states by definition are false. Transitory states are all the states we're in when we're with the ego. That is not peaceful. Anything that isn't peace and love is transitory. It is something that we made up because of our belief in our sinfulness. And eventually, and that might be really scary for a while, eventually we will say no to that sin. We might not be there yet. We might be too afraid what that means. It's like blasphemy. If I would say no to the sin, I'm not sinful. If you grew up Catholic, you could never say that. It is like the highest sin of Christianity to say, there is no sin. And I don't believe in it anymore. You could never say that. You would be crucified like the guy 2,000 years ago that said, there's no sin. Love is all there is. And I said, what? No way. So eventually we will come to a point, and that point is not one single point. It's a period of time where we start to come into our own as the decision maker. We're no longer the puppet. Christ comes into his own. We become the decision maker. And eventually we will start to practice saying no to the ego. And we can practice a very strong no. We can say, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. And again, we might overdo it. If you have steel that is bent this way and you want to have it straight, you might want to have to bend it this way for a while, and then it can level out. So there's nothing wrong with overdoing it. That no against the ego. And it takes a while to practice it, but it's not so much the practicing it, it's to go to the thought behind it and realize, why am I not deciding for peace? I've been doing this course for 30 years, 20 years, 10 years, 50 years. Why am I still deciding for the ego? Why am I not saying no to the ego more often? In paragraph 2, in chapter 2, very early on in the text, Jesus tells to Helen, you are much too tolerant of mind wandering, and are passively condoning your mind's miscreations, which is the ego thought system, right? Everything that isn't peace is our miscreation, our miscreations. We are much too tolerant with our mind wandering because we still think our wandering mind will save us. We think if our mind wanders away from Jesus, away from love, away from the truth, it will save us. Because the last thing we want is to go back into the mind, cross through the barrier of guilt, and join with Jesus and the Holy Spirit and our memory of God. While we believe in sin, that is the furthest from our mind. We're like, no, I don't want to do this. Right? And Jesus says, you're much too tolerant with that. Do not go gently into that good night. Don't be so tolerant with your mind wandering. Say no. Start saying no to the ego. Become the decision maker. Leave the realm of being decided upon, the one that is being decided upon, and become the decision maker. And I will help you. Because you cannot successfully decide against God. So you can practice that decision-making inheritance on everything you see, on every experience you have. You can actively practice that. I am the decision maker. The power of decision is my own. I might still 99% of the time decide for the ego, but I can start to begin to realize that the power of that decision lies within me and not with anything outside. And eventually we will come to the point where we can say, I will say no to the dying of the light. I will use the power given to me by God as the Son of God, within the sonship of God, that cannot be changed. I will use that decision-making power to remember to love the love of the Father. The oneness of heaven. That we're all one. As a closing, because this is a little shorter, a special segment, I'm going to read the paragraph 9 of the Wait a minute. No, hold on a second. Okay, I'm going to read paragraph 11 and paragraph 12 of lesson 152. The power of decision is my own. Now do we join in glad acknowledgement that lies are false and only truth is true. We think of truth alone as we arise and spend 5 minutes practicing its ways, encouraging our frightened minds with this. The power of decision is my own. This day I will accept myself as what my Father's will created me to be. Then will we wait in silence, giving up all self-deceptions as we humbly ask our capital S self that he reveal himself to us. And he who never left will come again to our awareness, grateful to restore his home to God as it was meant to be. In patience, wait for him throughout the day and hourly invite him with the words with which the day began, concluding it with this same invitation to yourself. God's voice will answer, for he speaks for you and for your Father. He will substitute the peace of God for all your frantic thoughts, the truth of God for self-deceptions, and God's Son for your illusions of yourself. The power of decision is my own. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Good night.